or ended the speech, the session, we'll move on to Terry, and Mr. Corey can begin with the first topic.
Okay, I'm coming up there. I think it's a better mic. Then we have Herb and Lisa, then we'll reverse it.
Okay, the first topic is how budgeting and sustainable finance and how you manage these. They're two different topics in reality, but they're tied together by the sustainable. The budget process has always been the same for any endeavor that does up a budget, whether it be a household budget or an in-Canada corporation budget. Simplistically, how much revenue are we expecting? What are we obligated to spend? What would we like to spend? And the difference is the only subject that needs to be debated. The key difference between private and for-profit budgeting and municipal budgeting is that for-profit sets a target. For example, coal's going to sell for $10 a ton. You can sell 10,000 tons this year, that's $100,000. So from there, we just simply work backwards to find out if there's going to be anything left over at the end. If there's not going to be any left over at the end, well, then the shareholders or somebody's got to cough it up. A municipal budget works the other way. All departments submit their budgets for the year. These costs need to be identified very clearly what they are. A, services mandated by law, so things you can't do anything about, you have to spend that money. Social services that are a requirement of the community, so that's stuff that you guys want. You demand that we have certain things in order to keep our quality of lifestyle where it is. And then we have the wish list. Everybody has the bigger wish list than any of the rest, but it might be extra training, new and efficient equipment, or simply something more visually appealing. Council's job then is to determine the importance and necessity of C, the wish list. Council's job then is to determine the social and political impact of B. That's where it gets a little fuzzy. That middle one is where you either get elected or you don't get elected. Then council's job is to authorize administration to proceed with A, which is the mandated costs that you have to do. There's certain things we have to do. For example, water and sewer and all these kind of things. This needs to be the basis of our budgeting process. Determine the total cost and determine predictably what the outside sources of revenue are going to be without property taxes. The balance difference is how municipalities balance their budget. It's a simple matter than doing math. You need $4 million, you get a $4 million assessment, that's a 10 mil assessment, way you go. That's how it's done. So in order to ensure sustainability, it is vitally important to have a detailed cost control and a certainty of government funding. That's the two key things. The predictability of tax assessments is the easy part. I mean, we know from past history they're going to go up, unless there's a little downturn, but they're basically going to match the rate of inflation at least, unless we have a really big upturn like we did have. Thank you very much.
Now each candidate can rebut or ask two questions.
I'll use this mic. You got it turned on here. I'll use that. It's better.
I won't add to what Mr. Corey has said, but first the question I would like to clarify here is the question is how would I do this, or how would this the mayor's? First of all, the mayor does not and cannot make decisions regarding budget independently or without council. The mayor always chairs this meeting, however, all items discussed must be voted on and approved by council, so it's not a one-person show. The ideal situation that we all strive for in any business is more money in and less money out. And the expenses in between are what causes us the most concern, as was echoed by Mr. Corey. Hence, our sustainability will be determined by our corporate review, which this council has budgeted for, which will examine and determine where we can gain efficiencies of how we spend money on a greater and longer term items. And that's all I have to say about budgeting for now.
The process, which I think we jumped a little bit, was Mr. Curry was to speak on the top item. you have any questions?
No, I don't. I think it's clarified the matter very well.
Okay, Lisa?
I did actually. In your answer to the question, you talked about town budgeting, but you didn't discuss anything about sustainability. So I was wondering what type of initiatives you might have towards sustainability as money is coming in.
Good question. Yeah, I did speak to it, but I'll expand on it a little bit. To ensure sustainability, it was vitally important to have a detailed cost control. So that goes without saying. We've got to have that. Yeah, it's the cornerstone. And the other thing is going to be a certainty of government funding. And we're beholden to all levels of government. We're at the bottom of the pile. I mean, the MPs above us, then there's the provinces, the feds, everybody. And we're continually getting downloaded on, especially by the federal government, and not being compensated fairly for it. So that's the key, is to get some certainty of government funding. Now, I'm really concerned with what the MD is doing now with their extra funds, and I truly believe we're on the upswing for huge amounts of money that are going to come in there, and we're going to go down the downswing. And I want to see them putting that money aside to the benefit and the investment of all the communities, because we'll all grab a whole bunch of it, and then all of a sudden their budget goes down to $60 million next year. Well, we're all going to get 60% of what we got this year. That can't happen. It needs to be an even flow. We need certainty of funding.
Hey, we got to keep it a little bit shorter, guys.
No, sorry.
You're old.
5 minutes, about 2 seconds.
Lisa, I think you're up next in regards to the budgeting and sustainability.
Before budgeting and financing, we need to pursue a corporate and financial review as recommended by our former CAO, Alan Parkin, in February of this year. This would be to determine where monies have been spent and to address our current financial situation. I took the opportunity to look into a few communities from around Alberta, some our size, some larger. I wanted to get a broader sense of when municipal budgeting is primarily done. I found the best practice is typically to get the budget done prior to the new year. A good practice is to budget on a 3-year cycle, allowing for regular review with the content based on actual needs, not wishes. Some considerations we should look at when determining our financial sustainability are re-examining the town marketing plan and promoting grant cash to the outside community. This can be done by revamping the current social marketing layout, with the use of co-promotion and a diverse video marketing plan, and cooperation from local groups, services, industry, and citizens. By thinking globally and working together with MDE as co-promoters, we will be able to construct a pyramid-type marketing system, which has been proven to get millions of touches in 24 to 48 hours. Having an excellent understanding of online marketing through a few courses and by setting up a viable practice model, I was able to test this idea successfully on a smaller scale. Unfortunately, due to the amount of websites utilized, it's hard for many people not familiar with computers or social marketing to be able to use it to its fullest potential. It's a bad habit of mine to experiment and make sure I know what I'm talking about before promoting it. Working with our neighbors, the MP, local industries, and co-ops, we will develop an inter-municipal agreement allowing us to have a plan for future expansion. An agreement like this, negotiated properly, would allow us to identify joint development and promotional opportunities. It would allow us to address inter-municipal issues such as money allocation and land purchasing in the future, with us gaining a better understanding of industrial development of our developing region, as it is the fundamental basis of this community's origin. Looking to increase our tax base rather than continuously over-dipping in the same pool, we need to consider working with industry, promoting what is already in existence, and finding out what may be needed. By encouraging road maintenance and development within the MD borders, we could potentially draw the road users from the Fox Creek area to Grande Cache by providing similar or complementary industrial services from Grande Cache as what is in Fox Creek. This would allow us to complete for business, industrial, and residential development monies in 3 directions. Thank you.
Herb or Terry, do you have any questions?
I have a couple of points of clarification. The corporate review that was scheduled by the current council, not by the CAO of Mr. Parkin. And also, as far as budget, I'm pleased to announce that the MD of Grandview has advanced us another $3.6 million. So that just came through recently. So thank you.
Well, it's nice you said that. I had heard about that, but I didn't know for sure. So just a question for Lisa. How do you feel about deficit financing? The town right now has about a $9 million borrowing leverage. That's our cap, and that's what's available. And would you see council approving an interest-free loan to tidy up some debt on the understanding that a year from now, the MD is going to fund as they did today?
Working as a service provider with Native Counseling Services, I'm a little loath to depend fully on government sustainability at this time. I don't feel comfortable with the reassurances they continually give with no actual backing behind it. It's easy to throw money or say that they're going to throw money towards us, but I think at Grand Cache, we need to take a little more of a proactive stance and start looking at other ways to make means of money to become more sustainable rather than looking at the government as our full support. Thank you.
I'm getting a little confused. I think it's Lisa's on the topic of how would you improve the finance, improve the...
Number 2.
Number 2?
Herb.
Herb, okay.
I can go with, yeah.
How would you improve the town, how would you improve the finance of the town infrastructure is the question. Again, I want to clarify this. Again, the mayor and the council, this is a mayor and council decision, not a mayoral decision. In order to continue forward momentum, we need federal, provincial governments to come to the table and fund our infrastructure issues. Yes, that has been how it's been done in the past, and that's how the only option we have at the present, although, yes, we do need to push the envelope and look at other ways to finance that. We need to develop a positive relationship at all 3 levels of government in order to acquire the support that we need to do that. And the present council has made it a priority to establish or not to establish, but that a reserve fund be maintained to dealing with these types of contingencies. And so a lot of our reserve money was used towards building the rec center. So thank you.
Do we have any questions from the other mayor candidates? Just stand there.
Yeah, Herb, you can probably clarify for me, because I don't have that information. Was the wastewater water master plan updated in the last 3 years, or are we still working on the same one? Do you know? I mean, it was pretty current 3 years ago, so.
You know, it's been under, I'll get up with this. The water treatment and the wastewater has been under the microscope here for 3 years of my term on council. And what we had applied to the provincial government for funding, however, they did not come through with any grant money for this, so it's still outstanding, and I think that the clock is running.
Herb, pertaining to your question about funding, Wasn't there funding available and the grant lapsed out before anybody realized what was happening? Can you add a little more to that maybe?
My understanding was that there was no grant money available.
I think we're gonna do a little change here. Instead of jumping up and down, we'll just move this mic. Oh, we'll have two. Does that work? Yep, try it. Is it working? Okay. Yep. Do you wanna get up or do you wanna stay? It's easier to pass the mic. I think it's easier to pass the mic instead of jumping up and down. Can we throw it? Yeah. Well, give us two. Give you two, okay? Oh, you don't know you need one. No, I don't need one. So the next topic is how would you support your community facilities and programs, and what will be your first priority? We'll start with Terry. Is it your?
We have to do the infrastructure. You can speak on it, so it's Herb's turn.
Okay. Or your turn.
Sorry, please. Want me to keep track?
That'd be a good idea. Thank you.
Whose turn is it?
We all have mics.
Who's on first? Lisa.
Oh, you want this one? Okay. There we go.
Sorry. I took the time to look over the strategic list of priorities put together by the former CAO, Alan Parkin, in January of this year. This is the list put together for the council to have a direction to follow, with several of our priorities finally being cleared away. Through the last few months, by the efforts of our interim CAO, Mr. Rick McDonald. We will need to look at immediately following a capital replacement plan that should have been completed over the last few months. This starts with a replacement schedule, which allows us early looks at when items ranging from building materials to public works equipment to sewer line replacement should be done. We will then allocate monies to a replacement reserve fund every year. Generally, money from taxes and infrastructure funding, such as Municipal Sustainability Initiative, which if properly handled would be sitting in a reserve fund for long-term use. Although government funding for infrastructure is dwindling and old programs for items such as sewer line repair are currently not available, these programs generally cycle, and when they become available, we will be applying for them immediately. Rather than expecting administration to be responsible for finding money to support the corporation, council needs to be more open to doing research and providing options, whether they are viable or not, to the community. By communicating as mayor with all essential players, I will be helping to write proposals and gathering information rather than hounding administration to hurry up because citizens are questioning me. This is one way of speeding up process. As a group, we will start to lobby our MP harder for federal money to the community, as we have been passed over for several potential funding opportunities geared towards infrastructure. We will look at upgrading the old pool area with the wooden subfloor over the opening, which would allow for storage space underneath. Upon finishing the new room, we should look at an option of leasing the space to another community-based organization as a cost-sharing method. This is with the intention to be utilized for programming available to the community. For a few years, this would offset some of the cost until we could afford to renovate or maintain it ourselves. In an effort to encourage local entrepreneurship, we could also look at someone taking over the fitness facility, equipment, and equipment contracts on a lease basis. This would reduce the need for staff in that particular area, as well as bring a profit to the rec center, while removing some of the pressure off the town budget. These are just many more of my ideas and entrepreneurship opportunities that could be available. Everything that really needs to be maintained, we just really have to be realistic about our spending habits. Thank you.
Do you have some, is there any questions in regards to Lisa's?
No, I do have one question though. It's for Richard Thompson here. Are you texting Lisa here?
I'm texting actually both co-workers.
Oh, okay.
Lisa,
Okay,
and my household.
okay, thank you.
I'm sorry if I'm texting and offending people. I can stop doing that. However, with your wife standing right behind me with me on my shoulder, I don't know what to say.
Okay, so let's just move on with the debate. And Herb, I think that Lisa's.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, don't have any questions. I get to go next, or?
Right, yep.
So, for infrastructure, a detailed plan was already in place. Like, it was a really detailed plan, wastewater, water management plan, done 3 years ago, and I asked Herb if it had been updated. Really didn't need, because it was like a 10-year plan. I'd like to see it a little farther reaching, to 25 and 50 year, because when we start to replace infrastructure, now the mandate is that it has to be a 50 year. If you can build a bridge, it's gonna last 50 years. Might as well have a water line that's gonna last 50 years. So, my key point is that it must be funded solely by user fees and then other government level funding. We cannot let the federal government off the hook, because costs to our town, Canada, are often a direct result of a crisis somewhere down the road. Then the federal government throws on a requirement, and we have to follow suit. And I think people remember Waterton and a few other things. The requirements are good. It makes sense. It keeps things safe, but we get downloaded on and are expected to follow through, and we just don't have the money to do that. So I want to look at public-private partnerships for new infrastructure. Does it make sense to have a partner in water treatment? I mean, it was approached years ago, and maybe now's the time to have a look at that. Maybe that partner can market water safer, better. It needs to be discussed. As it stands now, water and wastewater are a break-even endeavor, and we only know this now. We never knew that before, so kudos to the previous council for getting that on tap. Is water from a new treatment plant going to be more value than the cost to produce it? Well, obviously, go buy a Dasani water sometime and see. There are lots of opportunities out there, but we need to think outside the box. We have something that Peter Lougheed said 30 years ago would be a great next commodity, and that's water. So we need to make sure that our wastewater and our water are protected. We need to make sure that our recycling program gets on tap, and we need to make sure that our rec center and those infrastructures get completed.
Any questions?
I can add some clarity to that. The town has gone to a contract with Aquaterra to manage their water treatment at the moment, so that is a step in the right direction here. So.
Thank you. Any other further, Lisa, any further questions to Corey? Or? Okay, thank you. So the next question, I guess, I better take the mic because I guess somebody couldn't hear.
Down below, or over in the corner. Can you hear me now? Good. So, we're moving on to how would you create community spirit and a feeling of inclusion within the town of Grande.
Chris, number 3 was skipped.
Oh, okay.
Community facility.
Sorry. How would you, they're keeping the moderator in line. How would you support community facilities and programs, and what would be the first priority?
Who's first to start?
To support the continuing efforts, my first priority is to put together a marketing plan and fundraising portfolio to bring in more money to increase and maintain ongoing programs. Through co-promotion with other organizations, businesses, industry, and our government, we will maximize our fundraising potential, allowing us to put money towards finishing off our current facilities. I have a wide range of experience with the various programs and services provided in our community. I have taken the opportunity to coach a few workshops on nutrition and healthy living at our rec center. And I have, as a service provider, taken time out to explore the FCSS services provided at the rec center, as well as many other organizations and services available. Not many people in the community seem to know what a rich, diverse set of resources we have. It seems no matter how many things get promoted, it's easy to miss or overlook items or events. As a council, we need to become informed and start to promote these programs. Even though we may not personally use these services, it will help us build connections with people in the community who do not or may require them in the future. We have to remember that we are not there to serve one particular group of people. With Grande Cache having so many diverse needs and an ever-changing population, we need to remain connected to our citizens. It is ultimately about you, the citizens of this community, and providing for everyone's needs. One of the biggest perks of living in Grande Cache is the flexibility of our many service providers, who are willing to leave their offices to provide help and quite often carrying gear in other locations to accommodate people in need. However, to protect our workers from burnout and high turnover, we need to advocate and support them whenever we can by maintaining and attending the interagency meetings. We can readily assist other organizations promptly. By involving industry and WCB, we should start to look at setting up a facility based on physical rehabilitation and pain management, recognizing that industrial work-related rehab is an unheralded issue in Grande Cache. I understand how essential services like these can be, and with the inconvenience of out-of-town travel. With an insurance-first system, there is a great potential that we could alleviate the pressure off of our local public system. By working with industry, business, and WCB, we would be able to utilize their health plans for workers and their spouses to support care providers locally. Working with Blue Cross, Service Alberta, and other private insurances, we can vastly improve the quality of life for many more, the whole time keeping spending money normally spent in Grand Prairie, Hinton, or even Edmonton local. Thank you.
Is there any questions? With regards to Lisa?
Lisa, I just wonder if you have any sense as to what impact that would have on our overtaxed medical facilities now. Do you view that as a really long-term solution, or would it be something to be implemented more quickly?
A rehabilitation program can actually be implemented in Grande Cache rather quickly. Working with an organization like the LifeMark Center, they have many offices operating all around Alberta currently, and they take in workers from the coal mine and other types of industries that might be injured. There's nursing, all sorts. And what happens is they have a first come, first served basis. It's based on your insurance. And generally they'll have multiple therapists working within them. So you'll see possibly an acupuncturist, a physiotherapist, a massage therapist. We already have some of these services available in Grande Cache, but by putting them all into one particular clinic, we could increase the rehabilitation of citizens in the community a lot quicker than having to wait for a year to be put into a facility in Grand Prairie and then having to commute. With this option, we would also have the ability to bring people from other communities to Grande Cache. Thank you.
One question, do you have any costing for this stuff?
This wouldn't be our initial cost. Again, we would look for outsources. So a company like LifeMark would be the ones coming to us with the contract and giving us the cost analysis, telling us what it would bring to the community. So it wouldn't be at our cost, it would actually be an enterprise all of its own. Thank you.
I think it's Terry's.
Number 4, community spirit and inclusion.
Number 4.
Right on.
I haven't spoken to number 3.
Oh,
That's right.
oh, haven't you? Sorry.
How would you support the community facilities and programs, and what would be your first priority? Firstly, I feel important to conduct an audit or review of all the existing programs and services and initiatives to ensure that we are meeting the intended goals here in the town. I would strike a committee of community stakeholders to review this report and determine if the said programs and services are meeting the intended goals. This committee needs to make their recommendation to council based on program evaluations and their recommendations for the community programs that need to be sustained or improved upon. My first priority is to establish a plan to finish and develop the remainder of the recreation center and also address the arena dressing room issues for the ever-growing number of female hockey players. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, Herb, I'd like to know how you plan on funding the finishing of the rec center and building the change rooms for the female hockey players.
As I said in my opening comment, that would be my priority to develop a plan to do that.
Okay, I think it's time now to move on to the fourth question.
Okay, here we are again, community spirit and inclusion. First thing, if you're a volunteer and you log more than 100 hours, town will refund your taxes. Just kidding. Just kidding. I had it. And on a serious note, we need to define community spirit. When there's a crisis, we rally around, and Grande Cache is incredibly generous in that regard. There's always somebody to lend a hand. That is community spirit. But we need to foster those same feelings in bringing back community spirit to non-crisis events, like the old coal dust days, the corporate challenges. Let's put our hats on and become unique. We need an identity beyond the death race. We need service groups, a lot of them, volunteer groups, and above all, support from your council to make it happen. We need to engage youth, families, seniors, new Canadians, and our outlying communities. I believe it can be as simple as an outdoor hockey rink, a studio for dance, a proper soccer pitch, or an auditorium for drama and the arts. So that means we continue to develop the rec center and recreation fields to accommodate this. You know, when the rec center was begun, a fundraising committee was struck and began to raise money. And at that time, my fear was that the local donation pool would be short because of local needs not being met because people had taken their money and they put it toward the rec center. So a decision was made at that time by council to try to do the fundraising from corporate sources only that have interest here, the big guys, and leave local funding for local needs. I think that's still a key goal, but it was a successful campaign that ended too early. Fundraising should never stop. It has to go on and on and on. So we need to begin again and door knock our way to the next phase being completed. A feeling of inclusion. Inclusion is defined as a state of including or being included in a group or structure. I would foster the feeling of inclusion through policy and action that makes any community property or function that is accessible to one resident is accessible to all residents, be they children, families, seniors, whoever. It's a pretty lofty statement, but it is as simple as a well-developed welcome wagon.
Before we move on to Herb, Herb and Lisa, any questions? Terry? Okay.
How to create community spirit and feeling of inclusion. Personally, speaking during my last 3 years, I have met and spoke to many people individually and in small groups. I intend to continue this approach on a much larger scale, both formally and informally. I will ask Council to endorse initiatives that result in greater community engagement and discussion. I believe informal gatherings such as the recent meeting that we held to address the doctor shortage is a great method to promote community engagement and also to allow community as a whole to speak out and assist us in these important problem solving. My door will always be open and my phone will be answered in order to continue and promote discussion. Thank you.
Any questions of Herb? It's on to Lisa.
I think one of the first ways to develop community spirit is to vote in a new mayor like myself, with a progressive attitude who wants to see more people become leaders rather than followers. I believe by moving our community into the 21st century, offering a more modern access to the council meetings. To do this, we need to get the high-speed internet line running in Grande Cache for a quicker download and a bigger broadband to sustain all the local users and future developments. With the high amounts of information people are getting inundated with on Facebook, I think we may want to decrease sites to get more views, which would also cut down on staff surfing time. We also need to look at making our website more user-friendly to the community. Adding a community calendar and expanding links would allow for other organizations to be able to use it. We need to promote our website more to the community as an information hub to encourage use and work together with industry to promote it to their employees. I will continue to work closely with the interagency group and other organizations in the community to keep informed of their needs to help them maintain continued success. I believe it is a priority for council to rebuild the relationship with the school board, and council needs to familiarize themselves with the local cultures, services, and organizations. We need to set up a better system for volunteering, working with the schools, organizations, and a welcome committee to encourage and promote volunteer opportunities, allowing our youth and newcomers a wider range of options. We will look into co-promoting with the radio more for promotion of local events and news. It is apparently heard by many locals and potential tourists who are within our bush area. Many workers are too tired after a 10 to 12-hour day to read the paper or surf Facebook when they get home, missing many of the local events. We need to entice people to look at our community in a different light. Looking back in time, we need to create a welcome committee and looking at having a quarterly welcome event, or see about bringing back Welcome Wagon. The community currently has a great welcome